We open our broadcast today mourning the 136 hostages who are still being held in Hamas captivity. Today marks 100 days since innocent men, women, and children were kidnapped by Hamas terrorists from Israel and dragged into Gaza. Since then, we know from the hostages who have already been released that the hostages have been held in inhumane conditions, have been sexually assaulted in many cases, have been beaten and psychologically tortured, and have been denied the most basic necessities such as medication. Not a single NGO like the Red Cross has provided them aid or spoken with them to date. Among the hostages are Kfir Bibas, a 1-year-old baby, and multiple civilian young women, such as Noah Argamani, who may never see her terminally ill mother again if she is not released from Hamas captivity. Instead of the world uniting in the demand for the immediate release of all hostages, the world has politicized this conflict when this is a human rights issue. Time is running out for the remaining hostages. Now is the time that the world needs to set aside views on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and demand that Hamas release our hostages. Kidnapping must not be tolerated as a method of conflict in modern warfare. Bring them home. As Israel and the global Jewish community mark 100 days of captivity, a massive 24-hour rally is taking place at Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. ILTV's Ariella Lahiani is on the scene. Ariella, thanks for being with us. Can you share more with us about what's going on in the Hostage Square right now?
Yes, Emily, thank you. So today we are marking 100 days since the start of the war, and 100 days that 136 hostages have been held under Hamas captivity. And I'm here now in the Hostage Square in Tel Aviv, where a 24-hour rally is being held. We're expecting to see hundreds of thousands of people attend today. There'll be performances from many singers, including Omar Adam, talks from families of the hostages, and they've even constructed a copy of a tunnel for people who attend to go in and feel the humidity and the claustrophobia that we can't even imagine the hostages have been through and are still going through. This has been put together to place pressure on the government to up their effort to bring them all home.
They deny the kidnapping of our children, the murder of our grandchildren, the rape of our daughters. The new Nazis we face today will stop at nothing to destroy civilization as we know it. The World Jewish Congress was created exactly for these times like this, so every Jew can fall asleep at night knowing they are safe in their own home. We are a voice for the Jewish people everywhere. We are the World Jewish Congress.
Day 100 of the war in Gaza. Prime Minister Netanyahu addressed the nation, saying that the goals of the war had not changed. Israel was continuing the war to its conclusion, to total victory over Hamas, return of all hostages, and security guarantees in Gaza after the war. The Prime Minister said access to Gaza through the Rafah crossing to Egypt must be controlled by Israel. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
Speaking to the nation on the eve of the 100th day of the war in Gaza, Prime Minister Netanyahu noted the hardships being faced by the nation and said that the war's objectives have not changed.
אנחנו מציינים היום 100 ימים למלחמה, 100 ימים ליום הנורא שבו נטבחו ונחטפו אזרחינו. אנחנו ממשיכים במלחמה עד הסוף, עד לניצחון המוחלט, עד שנשיג את כל יעדינו. חיסול החמאס, השבת כל חטופינו, והבטחה שעזה לעולם לא תהווה עוד איום על ישראל. אנחנו נחזיר את הביטחון גם לדרום וגם לצפון. אף אחד לא יעצור אותנו.
Signaling a direction in the military operation in Gaza, Israel has reportedly informed Cairo that the IDF will launch a military operation to capture the strategic border crossing on the Gaza side of the Egyptian border. The border crossing in the southern Gazan city of Rafah has been the main source of weapons smuggling to Hamas in tunnels from Egypt.
ציר פילדלפי הוא אפשרות אחת של מה שאני קורא סוגר דרומי או חסם דרומי. ברור לך שאנחנו לא נסיים את המלחמה בלי שנסגור את הפרצה הזאת. כי אחרת נחסל את החמאס, נדאג בעצם לפרז את עזה, ואחר כך כל פעם ייכנסו עוד אמל"ח, עוד אמצעי לחימה, עוד אמצעים קטלניים דרך הפרצה הדרומית הזאת, אז ברור שצריך לסגור אותה.
According to the Wall Street Journal, Israel plans to take the Rafah border crossing and station forces along the so-called Philadelphia corridor separating Egypt and Gaza, with Israeli forces operating within the Gaza Strip. Egypt reportedly rejected an Israeli proposal to have Israeli troops conduct joint patrols on the Egyptian side of the border, but was working to install barriers and increase surveillance in the area. A senior Israeli official said that Israel must control the crossing because the only way to control a geographic area is to control what's going in and out. The border security corridor would need to stretch about 12 kilometers. On the ground in southern Gaza, the IDF is continuing to press its advance into the Hamas-controlled stronghold of Khan Yunis. The army revealed video of captured terror tunnels under Khan Yunis that had been used to hold Israeli hostages. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister's office says that vital medications will be transferred to Gaza hostages in coming days, with the Red Cross facilitating the transfer. During 100 days of captivity, the hostages have had no access to the ICRC, which has been widely criticized for failing to visit them in captivity or even ensure that much-needed medication is reaching those being held. The list of medications include those deemed as life-saving by the doctors. Until now, Hamas has rejected the demand, but reportedly agreed amid heightened pressure from Qatar.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple.
100 days since October 7th, and the IDF is firmly committed to continuing the fight against Hamas and defending Israel's northern front. Here with us to discuss Israel's next steps in the war is Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs research fellow and journalist Yoni Ben Menachem. Yoni, thanks for joining us. Let's start off with the toughest question. How can Israel accomplish its goal of eliminating Hamas and also ensure the release of the remaining hostages?
In my opinion, there is no other way than putting a lot of military pressure on Hamas because Hamas is stalling. They want to gain time. They want the international pressure to increase on Israel, so Israel will stop fighting and they can survive politically and militarily without releasing the Israeli hostages. I personally don't believe that they are willing to release all the Israeli hostages, even if we cut a deal with them. They will always try to leave some hostages as an insurance certificate for the political survivor in Gaza. So the only way is to increase the military pressure on the leadership of Hamas, headed by Yahya Sinwar, who is hiding in the tunnels under the ground in Khan Yunis area.
Let's talk about Egypt. Israel is looking to take control of the Egyptian border crossing in Gaza. Why is this area so important for Israel?
There is a strip 15 kilometers long on the border between Egypt and Gaza Strip. This strip is called, in the Army code name, Philadelphia Corridor. Under this strip or corridor, there are hundreds of tunnels where Hamas is smuggling weapons from Egypt to Gaza Strip. Now, the Egyptians say that in 2014, they destroyed all these tunnels. But apparently, Hamas built new tunnels, not only smuggling weapons through these new tunnels, but also through the Rafah passage, by bribing Egyptian officials like custom and the Egyptian army, so they can put in the weapons from Egypt into Gaza Strip. So Israel must control this area militarily to stop this smuggling phenomena. There's no other way. Otherwise, Hamas will continue to have weapons.
Now, zooming out, U.S. and allies have begun strikes on the Iran-backed Houthis in recent days following their repeated attacks on international ships and Israel. Does this war now have the potential to spiral into something much bigger with Iran, especially given Hezbollah's recent escalations in the north?
I think that President Biden is very careful. He doesn't want escalation in the Red Sea. He doesn't want a regional war in the Middle East. He's now starting his presidential campaign and will do everything not to drag this situation into a full war. But I think the Americans are mistaken. They are aiming at the Houthis with their attacks, but the head of the octopus, the terror octopus, is Iran, and Iran is operating the Houthis. So the Americans should put pressure on Iran if they want to stop the Houthis, because these Houthis rebels are very experienced, and the United States and the Western coalition cannot win in the fight, in the battle against them, because they are very experienced and they can drag this war for years and years. So if the United States want to stop the Houthis attack, the address is Iran, not the Houthis.
Well, Yoni, we are out of time, but I want to thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing this important insight.
Thank you very much.
Israeli soldiers shot dead 4 terror suspects who had infiltrated into Israel from Lebanon overnight. This was the first known infiltration attempt from Lebanon since the start of the war in Gaza, and comes amid continuing cross-border clashes with Hezbollah along Israel's northern border. More from ILTV's Devo Klein.
The 4-man terror squad was spotted and eliminated by Israeli troops conducting a patrol of the northern border near Mount Dov inside Israeli territory. The mountainous area has no security fence and is currently covered in snow. The IDF fired artillery at the suspects to assist the Israeli troops on site. The infiltration attempt came amid another tit-for-tat cross-border strikes that are continuing on a daily basis. An anti-tank missile struck a northern Israeli home. No one was harmed by the rocket's impact. However, significant damage was caused to the home in the northern Moshav of Shtula, which suffered a direct hit. Israeli Air Force fighter jets continue striking Hezbollah terror infrastructure and positions across southern Lebanon. After 100 days of war, the IDF says that the army will continue to defend the northern border from Hezbollah for as long as it takes.
After about 100 days of war, we're facing the Hezbollah, which is a terror army that started shooting and firing at civilians in Israel since the second or the first day of the war. Our job is to defend the northern part of Israel. We evacuated some of the civilians so they won't be in harm's way, moved all our reservists to the front of the border, made plans, trained them, and we're now facing the Hezbollah and dealing with them.
The soldiers have adopted techniques of static defense, even though the IDF usually takes the initiative.
This time we look at 100 days of war is a long, long time, especially to reservists. Hopefully it will end fast. I have no idea, but we're prepared to do it until it ends. We can keep going until we are told that it's over.
Troops say that perceptions have changed since October 7th.
It was sinking in very fast that if we will not be here, they will be here. It sounds imaginary in October 6th, but it was the reality on October 7th.
The U.S.-led coalition launched multiple airstrikes targeting Houthi rebels in Yemen over the weekend. The allies followed through on threats after repeated warnings to the Houthis to stop targeting commercial vessels in the Red Sea. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
The first day of strikes on the Houthis hit 28 locations and struck more than 60 targets. An additional 2 targets were hit. On day 2, U.S. President Joe Biden warned that the Houthis could face further strikes. Biden also said that Iran has been sent a message.
No. Iran does not want a war with us.
Are you part of the terrorist group, sir?
I think they are.
What is strike successful last night, sir?
Yes. I don't think there's any civilian casualties. That's another reason why it's a success.
The strikes came after the U.S. Navy warned American-flagged vessels to steer clear of areas around Yemen in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden for several days after the initial strikes. The Houthis vowed fierce retaliation, further raising the prospect of a wider conflict in the region amid Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza. The U.S.-led strikes killed at least 5 Houthi fighters and wounded 6 others. The airstrikes came in waves, targeting 28 different locations across Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen.
Israel and South Africa faced off just a few days ago in the International Court of Justice after the African nation accused Israel of genocide in Gaza. Let's take a closer look at the core arguments put forward by both sides. Over the weekend, the International Court of Justice heard arguments from South Africa and Israel over the accusations made by South Africa that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza against the Palestinians. The South Africans argued, among other things, that due to the high number of civilian casualties and quotes from Israeli public figures, genocidal intent was demonstrated.
The international community continues to fail the Palestinian people, despite the overt, dehumanizing, genocidal rhetoric by Israeli governmental and military officials, matched by the Israeli army's actions on the ground.
However, the Israeli team countered that many of the quotes South Africa referenced weren't referring to civilians, but to Hamas terrorists. South Africa's legal team also made no mention of the fact Hamas uses civilian facilities and human shields in order to carry out terror activities, which has greatly impacted the civilian casualty count. Israel's team also focused on exposing how the IDF routinely calls off strikes and weighs military action through a strict legal code of proportionality, as per international law. Hamas, in contrast, has done the opposite, repeatedly firing at massive civilian populations with no military target in mind. Critics of the trial have slammed it as a distortion of international law and a witch hunt against the Jewish state, an argument Israel itself mentioned in the trial.
The applicant has regrettably put before the court a profoundly distorted factual and legal picture. The entirety of its case hinges on a deliberately curated, decontextualized, and manipulative description of the reality of current hostilities.
Following the hearing at the ICJ, Germany is among the nations who spoke out on Israel's behalf, pledging to intervene. Here to speak with us about the impact of Germany, as well as the hearing as a whole, is Amichai Cohen, an international law expert at Barnea Jaffe Landy Law Firm. Amichai, thank you for joining us now. Israel called for dismissing the case altogether at the ICJ in their argument. Do you think it's actually possible that the ICJ would do this?
It's possible, although it's not probable. The past decisions of the International Court of Justice have been quite flexible regarding the discussion regarding on genocide, allowing both states that are not directly connected to the conflict and claims in which the issue of dispute and the occurrence of genocide was not proven. The threshold the court put was relatively low to intervene. It should be a plausible case, and it's hard to believe that the court will not even discuss the case.
Now, many of South Africa's arguments seemed contradictory, like claiming that telling Palestinians to evacuate is an example of genocide. Is South Africa just grasping at straws here?
Clearly, South Africa's claim lack, I would say, connection with a lot of things that are happening in reality. So the Hamas, for example, was completely absent from the discussion of the war that's going on. If I hadn't known about reality, I would have thought that Hamas attacked on October 7th, and then according to South Africa, it disappeared. Hamas and Israel is acting in the Gaza Strip just in revenge. There's no war going on. So clearly South Africa's claim were disconnected, I would say, from the reality on the ground. And it also goes to your question. of the evacuation issue. The evacuation was both given as a proof to some kind of an Israeli plan to move Palestinians out of Gaza City, so part of the larger plan, and then were criticized that there were not enough evacuations. Once again, quite disconnected from the reality on the ground.
Now, this hearing has been harshly criticized for distorting international law for political purposes. Would you agree with that assessment?
This is not the first time that international law is used for political purposes. The reason South Africa went for the genocide claim is, of course, because of jurisdictional reasons. Otherwise, they wouldn't have any basis for bringing Israel to the International Court of Justice. Clearly, it became clearer after both days of the hearing that the main aim of South Africa is not necessarily to win the case on the merits. It's to create pressure on political pressure on Israel, creating an international coalition pressing Israel to stop the military campaign now. In a sense, then you're correct. It's using politics for instead of law.
Now, let's say that the court rules against Israel. What are the implications and what can Israel do?
So it depends what the court rules. If the court would issue an order simply saying, say, for example, Israel should not commit genocide, then this is something that would not necessarily affect Israel. Israel is not committing genocide. If, however, the court would rule that Israel should unilaterally cease its military campaign, this would have an effect, not because Israel would immediately cease the military campaign, I don't think it will happen, but because it will be harder for Israel to garner international support for its campaign. Say, for example, Israel would approach Germany, asking Germany to buy more arms and armaments for its military campaign. It would be more difficult for Israel to get states to sell it arms for a campaign that the court has ordered to cease. So it might create problems. I must say that it's my assumption, and I think many others, that the court will not issue an order for an immediate ceasefire. This is something quite improbable.
Well, thank you, Amichai. We are out of time, but this is excellent insight. I appreciate you being with us.
Thank you very much.
Let's take a look at the weather forecast. Light rain expected tonight throughout the country, with temperatures reaching lows of 10 degrees Celsius or 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, light rain expected in the north with partly cloudy skies in the south and temperatures at highs of 16 degrees Celsius or 61 degrees Fahrenheit. That's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all of your devices, check out our ILTV channels, subscribe to our ILTV newsletter, and don't forget to check out our new and improved website, ILTV.tv, with all the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.